All right, so welcome back everyone. Thank you so much for joining us back. So we are on this session 5 on this webinar series Archicad now on the topic template creation for Archicad projects. Okay, so on the previous sessions we saw how to set up the project settings inside Archicad projects so that we can develop our own company template. Okay, so we are in the last session as I told. In this session we are going to see how to migrate from a lower version to a higher version. So if in case in future Graphisoft releases a new Archicad version, so you need to upgrade your template. Are you guys not able to hear me?
We can hear you, Vimal. I guess Chipping
We
is
can
having
hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you, thanks. All right. All right. So, Chipping, can you please check your mic settings or the speaker settings? All right. So let me just continue. Yeah. So when you want to migrate from a lower version to a higher version, so you need to be careful with few things. So let me show the checklist that you need to keep in mind. So here is the checklist that we follow in Graphisoft before we migrate our template from a lower version to a higher version. But before going into this checklist, I just want to recap few things that we saw in the previous sessions. Okay, so as I told in the first session, when you're using Archicad for the first time, it is always better to start your project with any template, either be it a default template or a template that is provided by us. Okay, so the template that is provided by us is a highly customized one, so we always recommend to use that one when you start off the project. So it's customized to meet the local standards. Okay, so once you start the project, you will be doing a lot of settings inside the project. So at the end of the project, you will have a project with all the settings customized for your company standards. Okay, so at that point, after finishing your first project, you can copy the file of the first project and then open it and then remove all the 3D and then the 2D information that is specific to the project. So any project specific information, please remove from the project and then you can save it as a template. So while you save it as a template, you can again use the same checklist and then make sure all the information that is available inside your template or project generic so that it can be used for all your future projects. Okay, so now coming back, if you're upgrading from a lower version to a higher version, so you can use the same checklist here. So let's see one by one of them. So the first is the location settings. So let me go to Archicad and show you. So location settings are available inside options, project preferences, and then location settings. Okay. Okay, so if you see here in this template that we provide, you can see the project name that can be found inside file info and project info. So this is something which is more generic. So for people who are using your template, they will be able to understand how this information or where from this information is coming from. So okay, so if you're making a generic company template, make sure you make it as generic as possible so that people will understand it when they are using it. And you can also use some tips like this inside the template so that people can understand while using your template. So you can click here to edit your template, the project name, so you can see it opens the project info directly. Okay, and also the site full address, you can see here, if I click, you can enter a generic address so that it reflects the it doesn't reflect the project specific information. Okay, and also on the location, you can enter any reference point that you have, reference location that you have, or your company or your office location, whatever. So that becomes a generic location setting for you guys. Okay, so if you want to add any other information here that is that can be used by the people who are using the template, you can add them here. Okay, so let me just click OK, and then if I go back to my slide, so the next one is story settings. Again, story settings, let me go back to Archicad, so you can see the story settings inside your navigator in the project map. So right click, you will see the story settings here. So you can right click any of the stories there and then get the story settings. So this is basically defined based on the projects that you do. If you're doing high-rise buildings, you can just create maximum number of stories here with some default heights so that people can just come here and then edit the height. But if in case you are more towards the individual houses or landed properties or terrace house kind of a project, you can just have 2 or 3 stories here and then enter some generic height value so that people can use it effectively in your project. Okay, so that's how story settings has to be defined in your project template. Okay, so let me just click OK. So the next topic is project structure and view settings. Again, project structure and view settings, you need to define them inside the navigator here. Say for example, if you have already done the project, you will be having the project structure defined for that particular object. So you can go to the view map and then you can see in this template we have a lot of folders which is specific to the local standards. So similarly, you would have created such folders for your projects. So you have to retain only the views that are having that are more generic to all the projects. So if there is any project specific view, you can remove them. Say for example, if you have views like structural plan, architectural plan, or fire plan or ceiling plans, all that you can retain so that it can be used in the other projects. Okay, so you just open all those views and then remove any project specific information like annotations or any labels that you have placed inside the views. You can simply remove them before you save it as a template. Okay, so as I told, if you have a site plan or anything, you can retain them also. Okay, so for each view here, if it is a cloned view, you will have the view settings for the entire clone folder. Okay, so you will have the view settings for the entire clone folder. So you can go there and then define the settings there. So you can see we have the layer combinations, scale, structural display, pen sets. For each of these views or clone folders, you can define the view settings at the folder level. Okay, and we can also define the floor plan cut settings here and then save it as a template later for using in your future projects. So whenever you are saving a template, make sure the project structure is more generic, which can be used for most of your projects. Okay, so the next thing that we have to see is the layout book after defining the view map. So inside the layout, you can have the layouts that are more generic, as I told earlier. And then coming to the master layout, so you would have created your own title block inside the master layout. So if you have any information that is specific to the project, you can remove them here. And then try to use the auto text here. So if you see here, this drawing name is an auto text that is coming from the drawing that is going to be placed on this layout. Okay, so similarly we have project related information like insert QP name or the address of the project or company address and so on. So all this you can customize it and then make it in such a way that it is more generic for the future projects. Okay, so if any project specific information, kindly remove it before you save it as a template. All right, so the next thing that you need to define inside the navigator would be the publisher sets. Okay, so if you see here, there are a lot of publisher sets created. You can create your own publisher sets as you want. So for each publisher set, you have the publishing properties. So you can define your publishing properties depending on your project deliverables. Okay, so if you see here, this is currently a BIMX file. So you can also have DWG translator. So if you see, this is a DWG publisher set. For different translators, you can have different publisher sets. And if you can have one translator or one publisher sets for printing. So you can see if I go inside this publisher set, you can select the folders and then you can define the page setup. You can define the printer setting. Okay, so you can define your print options and all that. So if you have your standards that you normally follow in all your projects, so you can define the publisher sets in such a way that it will have all the functions, or it will serve all the deliverables that you're going to do when you do a project with this template. Okay, so coming back to the view settings, so for each view, as I told earlier, we have pen sets, model view options. So some model view options or some graphic overrides are specific to views. So before you save this views, make sure it is specific to that particular view and then save it. Okay, so there's one option here to show the zooming, so you can fit into the window, or you can just put it to the current zoom. So normally when we are saving the template, you can put it fit into the window. Okay, and we also have the renovation statuses. So if you're using your project for any ANA projects, or if you're using your template for any ANA projects, you can define the ANA work renovation filters and then use them inside the views here. Okay, so let me just click OK here, and then let's go back to our presentation. So here the next topic is the project preferences. Okay, so let me go back to Archicad to show the project preferences. You can see under options, we have project preferences, we have working units. So this working unit is normally the unit that is followed when you're drawing a component. So when you're creating a wall, this will be the unit that you need to key in the tracker and inside the dialog boxes and so on. Okay, so that you can define as we told earlier. So the next is the dimensions. So all this we saw previously. Okay, so you can define your dimensions and then calculation units. So if you see here, this calculation units and calculation rules are slightly different from the previous version, which is the Archicad 24 version. So in Archicad 25 they have updated a bit here to have more rules when you compare to the previous one. So these calculation rules you need to take care of when you're defining your new template. Okay, so next is the zones. So there are some calculations that you can do when you're calculating the area for the zones and then the volume for the zones. Okay, and then the next is reference line. So if you want to make use of your reference line, say for example here in this template we are using the first reference line as a height datum. So there's one more reference level, so you can use this reference level for any other project specific reference levels. Okay, so let me go further. Here are some of the rules for stairs. And then if you're using the template for any structural modeling, you can use these model units, and then the model representation, structural analytical model representation, and then the structural load units and so on. So you can define all this inside the template. Make sure all these are more generic before you save the template from your project. Okay, so let me just click OK and then go back to the next topic, which is the attributes. Okay, so going back to Archicad, so you can find the element attributes under options, and we have a lot of attributes here. So in the previous sessions, we saw how to create custom lines, how to create custom fills, and so on. So you can create your own pen sets if you want by duplicating the one that is available. And after creating your fills and so on, you can create your own surfaces based on the images that you get from internet or from your clients. Okay, so you can use those images to create surfaces, and then based on the fills and then the surfaces we can create building materials. So earlier in the third session we saw the relationship between the fills, surfaces, building materials, and composites. Okay, so when you create a building material, you need to have fill and a surface. So with these two you can create a building material. Okay, so if you have a building material, you will be able to create composites. Okay, so the next is the profile manager. If you have any generic profile that is being used in all your projects, you can define them and then create them inside the profile manager. Normally the profiles can be parametric, so you need not worry about the sizes, but you can create your profile as a parametric one so that you can define the sizes or define the dimensions when you're using it, so that it is can be used in all projects. The next is zone categories. So zone categories you can define based on the zone stamps that you want to use for the zones. Okay, so this operation profiles is basically for energy calculation, which most of us are not using it, so I'm not going into the details of it. Okay, so the next is MEP system. So if you're using your project for MEP modeling, you can create MEP systems and then define its representation both in 3D and 2D as per your company standards. and then those MEP systems can be used for all the projects across. Okay, so the next is the attribute manager. Let me open the attribute manager. Okay, so if you see here, we have all the attributes here, and then we can go one by one, and then you can, if you want to import any of the attributes from any file, you can just import it, and then you can just append it to the end of this list, or you can just overwrite by index. So as I told earlier in the previous session, whenever you're creating this, whenever you're using this override by index, it will override the previous one which is having the same index. Okay, and if you're overriding by name, it will override the same name components from the new one. So make sure you're not messing up with this attributes when you are importing new attributes from the other projects. Okay, so if in case you want to just have the attributes that are available on this template, you can use to just purge. So if you purge, it will have only the components that are used. So how to find only the attributes that are used? If it is having a tick mark, it means that it is being used in the template. So it can be used inside a fill, it can be used inside a material, or it can be used in any of the favorites and so on. Okay. All right, so when you're exporting or importing from the other, from other sources, you can see include all associated attributes. So if in case you are importing a building material, so it will also import the corresponding surface along with its fill used. Okay, so if the surface is having a fill, it will import the fill as well. So make sure you use this option when you are importing and exporting attributes in your project. Okay. All right, so let me just click OK. That's it about the attribute manager. So the next topic is classification and properties. So when we are doing projects in Archicad, normally we will create properties so that we can add metadata to the BIM components here. So here under options, we have property manager. So you can see here are some of the custom properties that are created either by using value, or by using expression, or making it undefined. Okay, so after creating all these properties, we will assign them to the components based on the classification. Okay, so the classification in BIM is basically like a common language which is used to structure the data or BIM data in such a way that who receive the end product of our model will be able to use it in a intended way. Say for example, if you are exporting it as an IFC and passing it to someone for checking, so if you have classified it, the components well, the checking efficiency of your checking will be increased. Okay, so this way we can call this as an effective way of information management using inside BIM. Okay, so that's how we use the classification inside Archicad. So we are assigning the properties to the components based on the classification. Okay, so not just here, we are using classification in other places. Like as I told, we are when we are exporting IFC files, we use classification, and even when we are applying graphic overrides, we can use the classification as a criteria, and then we can schedule the components based on the classification as well. So there are multiple places where we use classification inside Archicad. Okay, so let me show you the classification manager. Go to options, classification manager. Okay, so here currently in this template, I have two classifications. One is Archicad classification version 2, and the other one is MEP summation classification. So this MEP summation classification is actually a custom developed one for local standards. Okay, so this one is by default available inside Archicad. So if in case in future, if you want to use any other classification that has been given by the agency, so what you can do is you can just import them and then use it. So if you see here, I'm just importing a new version of Archicad classification 2.1. Okay, so I'm just clicking open here. It is asking me whether it wants to replace or merge the previous available classification. I just click skip here so that it creates a new classification system. Okay, so you can see the new classification system has been created. So let me just click OK here. So when I draw a component, So when I draw a component here, and if I go inside the settings of the component, you can see under the classification and properties, the newly imported classification is unclassified. Okay, so the newly imported classification is unclassified. So in order to classify all of them based on the name that is previously used, so in the previous classification it is used as a wall. So if the same wall exists inside this classification, I want to use the same. Okay, so in order to do that, we have a plugin developed for you guys. So if you are SSA customers, so you can use the plugin here. So you can see I have the update classification. Okay, so the old classification system is version 2.0, the new classification system is version 2.1. Okay, so I can choose the option. So I want to define or update the classification for all my elements, and then I can update all my favorites and also the default toolbars if you want to use them in the graphic overrides or even in the migrated properties. If you want to update them, you can update them. So you can see I have all that clicked in. So let me just click OK. So it just loads for a few seconds. So you can see here, if I go inside my wall and then go check the settings, you can see it automatically updated the classification in the newer classification system based on the name that we used in the previous one. Okay, so if it has the same name in the previous classification system, it will update the same one with the new classification system as well. Okay, so not just here, it also classifies inside the default tools. Say for example, if I go inside the slab and then go inside its settings, go inside the slab settings, you can see it also classified the default slab that is available on this slab tool. Okay, also in the favorites, it will do the classification. Okay, so now what you can do is, if you want to remove the older classification system, just go and delete the older classification system. So this is how you can migrate from one classification system to a newer classification system in the future if it is required. Okay, and for people who are not SSA customers, they have to do it manually. No choice. You can, if you want to do the classification updation for the project, you can use the schedules, but for the favorites and so on, you have to do it manually. Okay, so let's go back to the checklist. So we saw the classification and properties, and the next is the translators. Going back to Archicad, so as we saw in the previous sessions, we have translators for DWG and IFC. So you can find them in File, Interoperability, IFC translators here. So you can open the IFC translators and make sure the translators are set up in such a way that it is more project generic. So you can export it with any project that you do in the future. Okay, so make sure your translators for import and export are defined properly. Okay, so the next is DWG translators, DXF or DWG translators. So you can see here. So here are some of the translators that we saw previously, how to define them, if in case you are exporting your DWG file for further editing, you can use this, or as output, you can use this as well. Okay, when you are importing, you can use for editable import. Okay, so you can also duplicate and create your own translators here for your company standards. Okay, so make sure all these translators are defined properly before you save the project as a template file. Okay, so going back to the checklist here, the next is favorites. So last week we saw how to create favorites. So let's see, go to window, palettes, and then open the favorite palette. Okay, so you can see you will have all the favorites defined inside your template here. If in case you want to create, you can create, or if you want to redefine any favorite, you can redefine here. All this we saw from the last session. and you can import it from any of the project or export from the current project. Okay, and we saw how to check the missing information inside your favorites. So just go to the search box here and then type missing. So if anything, any library, or if any of the attribute is missing in your favorite, you can just hover over and you can see the information that is missing inside your favorite. So you have to fix it. So you have to open it and then fix it, or you can just redefine it by from a new element that is available on your project to fix this. So make sure you fix everything before you save it as a favorite. All right, so the next is library testing. This is again an extensive work that you need to do when you're migrating from one version to the other version. So what you need to do is just go to the libraries and objects, library manager, load your projects, project libraries or your company library. So you load all your company libraries here, and then you need to place each and every one of this object here. So you can place each and every one here. You can see. So I have all these objects. So after placing all these objects inside your model, you need to make sure everything is working as intended. So if any discrepancy is there, you need to edit your object and then save it again as a new library. Okay. So you need to place each and every object inside the project and then make sure it works as intended. Okay. So when it is from a lower version. Okay, so as we saw earlier, if you want to create an LCF again, you can see here, you can just create a container, or if you want to extract a previously created LCF to individual files, you can use this option to extract. So normally what we do is we first extract our previous library and then place them here inside the project and check everything. And if there is anything that is required to be changed, we just change it, and then we will create a container out of it so that it can be created as an LCF file which can be used for easy library management. Okay, so for managing your BIM cloud libraries, you can use this option to upload the new BIM cloud library to the BIM cloud. Okay, all right, so let me go back to the settings here. So the next important thing is the new features. So if in case in the new version, if you have any new features that is coming up that need to be incorporated in your template, you need to go out and watch for the new features that is available on the newer version, and then incorporate those changes inside your Archicad template. So if you see here, this location settings, so this location settings has been introduced in Archicad 25 for the survey point. All this has been introduced in Archicad 25. So we have just incorporated how this easting, northing, and elevations has to be used. So if you want to create any information that can be referred when people are using your template, you can use worksheets. So you can see here we have worksheet, and you can create a new worksheet and then define the information that you want to pass on to the people who are using your template. So you can see here, you can see when you're changing the story heights, the elevation of cutaway planes must be readjusted. So all this information you can just you can define, or you can and create inside the worksheets, so that people who are using your worksheet will be able to understand what it is and how it is to be used. Okay, so the next thing that I need to show is the schedules. So if you see schedules again, if you are using classification inside your schedules, so you need to go and check your criteria. So just go inside the criteria and then make sure the new classification has been updated. So whenever you're updating your classification, make sure you change the classification accordingly inside your schedules as well. Okay, so here maybe might be using criteria inside the schedules most of the times, so make sure you update them as well. Okay, or as I told previously, there was a new changes in the classification rules and units in Archicad 25. So we incorporated the rules here based on the newer version. So similarly, when you get a newer Archicad version which is having an update, so make sure you follow up with the update and then you incorporate the new way of working. So all this new features are introduced to improve the productivity. So obviously, if you incorporate inside your template, it will be helpful in your future projects as well. Okay. All right. So let me go back to the presentation. So this is more or less the checklist that we follow when we upgrade from one version to a newer version. So you can use the same when you're creating your template from the project, and then when you're upgrading also. Okay. All right, so please follow us on the social media to know more about the future events like webinars and user day. And on our YouTube channel, we have already posted the recordings of this webinar series for the last 4 sessions. Please scan the QR code that is shown right now on the screen so that you will get the playlist of the previous recordings. Okay.